Hi, in this video I'm talking with Grahame Broadbelt, who is the author of our white paper on human-centred organisations. Today we discuss a new learning organisation. You referred to this idea of new learning, and that's really kind of sparked some curiosity. So what do you mean by new learning?
One of the things that we're interested in generally is the relationship between this idea of human-centred organisations, liberating human potential, and organisational learning. But in the context of human-centric organisations, I wanted to really understand the sort of learning agenda, as it were. In order to kind of get a sort of grip on it, I started back at the whole idea that Peter Senge generated in his book, Fifth Discipline, called the learning organisation. Because that was very powerful at the time. I was around at that time when that book was first published. I actually worked with Peter Senge in Alaska for a while, and thought that idea had a lot of merit and was wise and so on. But it didn't really take off. There was a lot of interest in it initially, and then it never really kind of happened. And I've always been curious about why. But I think that partly it's because organisations are learning all of the time. So just like as human beings, we're learning all of the time. But particularly in an organisational context, I think one of the challenges about learning is that there's kind of two sorts. The first sort of kind of learning is the sort of learning that reinforces the things that we think that we already know, or reinforces our behaviour, or reinforces a worldview or a prejudice. If we just continue to do that, then we're not going to significantly change. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to use the opportunity of learning to make it more difficult to change, because it's just going to reinforce our confirmation that we were always right. So the idea of new learning is learning that shakes things up, that runs counter to some of the comfortable or sort of standard views that we might have. So let me give you an example. Famous Olympian Jessica Ennis, who was amazingly successful. But one of the things that happened to her was that she broke her right ankle. And one of the events she was competing in was long jump. And although her ankle healed, her coach said, "There's no way that we can use your right leg to launch from on the run up. We're going to have to go with your left leg." And she said, "Well, but my whole life has been training to do the long jump from my right leg. There's no way that I'm going to be able to, switch so radically to be leaping off my left leg. Forget it." But amazingly, she did learn how to jump off her left leg and achieved a personal best in long jump from her left leg. So the point about that story in terms of new learning is that she would never have thought that shifting from one thing to another thing, literally from a left foot to a right foot or right foot to left foot, was going to make that much kind of difference. But actually, it did, because it challenged her prejudices, it challenged her thinking, opened up possibility for something that was new.
So how do we notice within our organisation, and how do we challenge when we see old traditional learning or learning versus new learning?
Well, I think that, it's really tricky because obviously there's, we're learning all the time, and some new learning might be really small and some new learning might be really big. But I think for me, we know that we're learning something new when it provokes us to think or take action differently. So that's kind of the test. And it might be really small. It might be that we make a decision to start a meeting in a particular way because we've now decided that that's as a result of some new learning. We've looked into the whole business of having meetings, and we now realise that we've been doing it wrong, or we haven't been doing it optimally. And so we need to change our approach. Now, that might have a profound impact on the quality of the meeting, but as a change, it might be really small. Or it might be really big, is that we suddenly realise that we fail to understand the impacts of our energy policy through our supply chain on the production of CO2, because we've not measured it before. And so suddenly we now realise that we've got to change our approach if we're going to start bearing down on our overall emissions from our operation, as an example.
Well, and that's a good example, because if we're thinking about addressing problems that we haven't had in the past, then our old way of addressing those problems cannot be done with old thinking.
That's right.
And so disrupting our way of thinking enables us to think about the transformation that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And perhaps be surprised by those results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the definitions of new learning is that it's not easy, right? So, because by definition, it's not comfortable. It's challenging. It's running counter to some of the things that we already believe. It might be threatening some of our identity, and it might, in an organizational context, it might threaten organizational identities. Our organizational culture is safe and secure, and our world is very familiar, and whereas suddenly it all might change, and instead of managing through the rear view mirror, you're looking forward, and you realize that lots of things are coming over the track to disrupt what it is that you're doing. And that's when it becomes uncomfortable.
What are we doing in our organisations that's going to unearth new thinking?
Well, we think that the most appropriate methodology for to provoke and stimulate and support new learning is experiential learning. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot to say about all this, and Impact have been experts in experiential learning for 40 odd years. We've got our own approach. It's tried and it's tested, and it works, and it delivers new learning. It creates conditions where people feel uncomfortable and uncertain, but also helps people to come out and emerge from that with new understanding and new insight. Now, the challenge for experiential learning, certainly when we talk about it, is people think that they already know what it is. So it's just learning by doing, and of course that's not the case. One of the features of things that are not new learning is that we can continue to have experiences that just reinforce possibly bad habits or things that we already think. So it's not breaking anything. Just because we're doing something, just because we're having an experience, doesn't mean that we're learning anything from it, or we're not changing. Whereas experiential learning is deliberate. It's deliberately trying to create the conditions where we are forced to confront some really rich and deep learning that might change our behaviour, our outlook, or our mindset. And it's an art rather than a science to try and create the conditions where individuals can do that. But that's what we're interested in. So if new learning is the route to being a more human-centric organisation, then the route to creating the conditions for new learning is to use experiential methodologies, particularly the sort of methodologies I think that Impact is very experienced at.
We talked about the distinction between human skills and technology. Talk to me a little bit about that in terms of human-centric organisations.
I mean, I think it's one of the really interesting things that's happened in organisations as a result of the sort of digital revolution. The digital revolution being the arrival of a whole range of technologies that come under this general umbrella of digital technologies, and organisations have deployed technology, begin to use new tools and so on, and in doing so, are shifting the nature of the work that human beings are doing. So the simple way of thinking about it is that technology is replacing all of those relatively simple tasks that human beings used to do, because they're more suited to machines. Someone that I respect in this area has said that if a task can be reduced to a flow chart, then a machine is going to replace a human being doing that task very soon, which includes some really complex professional tasks, accounting, legal stuff, medicine and so on.
There is a role, of course, for technology to help us be more efficient in some not things.
Absolutely.
However,
so
what does that mean in terms of?
Well, what it means is that as I'm fond of saying, we're still not in a position where we've got robots serving other robots. The technology in organisations doesn't change the character of our organisations. There's still groups of human beings in service to other groups of human beings. It's just those human beings are using technology to provide that service to other human beings.
So we've almost amplified the relevance and importance of the human relationships.
That's absolutely right, because we no longer need to drive humanity out of our organisations to treat people as robots, because we've got robots for that, right? So that leaves us in a position where the thing that's most important, the differentiating thing, is the quality of our humanity in organizations, the ability for organizations to leverage that humanity in service to their wider goals, to use those unique human skills that can't be easily replicated, or can't be replicated at all by technology, certainly not yet, to add value to that human to human interaction between groups of people working in an organization and the groups of people that organization is serving.
So I can see now why there's this unique opportunity for us to hone our kind of focus, if you like, or focus ourselves on the very people that we've got in organisations who are best equipped to provide the creativity and innovation and ideas that our organisations so badly need in order to address these complex issues, by engaging them and enabling them to bring their brilliance into how the organisation sees itself in the future, and how the organisation can address the issues that are being faced.
Yeah, but there's still two things that stand in the way, though, I think, Joe. The first one is that we're still in a phase in our sort of understanding of organisations where we continue to conflate the person with the job that they do, or the salary that they earn, or their position in a hierarchy. And we're still in a position where we will tend to judge people about where they sit in an organisational hierarchy. And we've seen time and time again, as a barrier to effective organisational change, senior leaders not trusting very junior people to make decisions, to take responsibility, to advance learning, particularly new learning, so that they can change the way in which work is done, or what work is done, because those people are very junior or in the hierarchy, they're not paid very much, or they only work part-time. A human-centered organisation just sees the person, it doesn't see the job. And that's a really, really important component of liberating human potential in organisations, seeing people, not the roles or the paycheck or where they are in a hierarchy. So that's the first one.
Yeah.
The second one is to do with learning. Unfortunately, too many organisations still see their budgets for learning as only being available to the senior people, to managers, to C-suite, to people that are senior in organisations' hierarchy. But increasingly, with the arrival of digital learning technology, and we've got our own approach to all of that in Impact, there's no justification for limiting learning opportunities on the basis of cost, because digital technology releases a lot of the costs that were tied up with expensive running expensive training programs and so on.
It's a lot more accessible now, isn't it, through this?
It absolutely must be. So one of the opportunities of learning technology is the democratization of learning. So it's not just about the few, it's about everybody. And if you bring those two things together, you treat someone not as a job or as a position in a hierarchy and so on, and you provide learning for everybody, and particularly if you see that learning agenda as an end in itself. So rather than just saying, well, why would we bother training delivery drivers? As long as they've been through the basic delivery driver training, then that's fine. There's no need. But learning shouldn't stop there. Organisations should see themselves as human-centered organisations should see themselves as being responsible for developing potential everywhere in their organisation. So why not make more learning opportunities available to delivery drivers, or frontline shop workers or factory workers and so on, and encourage and support those people to take advantage of learning opportunities that the organisation is offering, because that's a good thing to do. Back to our argument about ecology, if every organisation took responsibility, for supporting everyone to learn, then the whole of society advances much more successfully, and learning technologies has the opportunity to do that.
Thank you for watching, and if you would like to download the white paper, you can do so in the link in the description.